Those of you following these videos may have noticed that I've said nothing about sharpening images up to now. Now, generally speaking, very few exceptions, I've not sharpened images for about 15 years. When I bought a Canon 1DS Mark III in England just before I came to Australia 15 years ago, that camera could capture 20 megapixels in the sensor. And at that point, I didn't feel I needed to sharpen the images. Now back then, and it hasn't changed since, I think that the sharpening of images by amateurs probably caused more problems than it solved. Because if we focus correctly and we have the correct shutter speed to avoid camera shake, and then we edit our images with the right amount of colour, clarity and contrast, I don't think they need any sharpening except in exceptional circumstances. It's probably true to say that if we're going to sharpen an image, we're sharpening an already sharp image. And what I mean by that is the sharpening controls that we see in Adobe Camera Raw and elsewhere are not going to focus an unsharp image due to camera shake or the fact that we haven't focused the image correctly. Now this is a picture you saw just a few moments ago, and as you can see now I'm showing you the crop, that it really is a small crop from a much larger frame. I've cropped and I've rotated it for effect, and I've done a little bit of editing and I've even dealt with the noise, but when I hit the enter key to commit this to the size of the image I'm going to create, it doesn't look too bad on screen. It looks pretty sharp. But there's going to be a limit to how much we can sharpen this. Now the original image was shot with 400 ISO, which is not massively high when we're thinking about noise. It did allow me, under the good lighting conditions, to create a 1600ths of a second shutter speed. So I've got a sharp shot, but then of course I've cropped so far down there's going to be a limit to what we can do. But let's take a look. Let's bring this up a little bigger so we can see more clearly, and I'll remind you, which I have done before, I think, that you will be viewing this on a slightly compressed YouTube video. So I'll see the effect of whatever we do here a little more than perhaps you will. If we're going to sharpen an image, and this one I think is a good example, I don't want to sharpen the sky. I've just spent time taking the noise out of the sky and the bird, so I don't want to put any back. So I would be doing some sharpening which is limited to crucial parts. Now we do have the opportunity to mask parts away, and it's underneath the detail section here, and if you hold the Alt key and click the mask, there you can see the white areas will be sharpened, the dark areas won't. Now you need a little bit of experience of this tool, but let me park it somewhere in the middle. Now if you look carefully at the eye and the beak of the bird, I'm going to push the sharpening up to its maximum. Now you can see it's having an effect. Is it having a good effect or a negative effect? Let me double click to set that back and we'll do it again. I'll come a little bit further back this time. It is having an effect. So one of the options is we can sharpen just some parts of the image using the mask here. Now here we're viewing an image from a previous video, and this one is quite sharp. So what are our options here? I think the first thing we need to do is to right click with the zoom tool selected and increase the size to 100%. Use the spacebar key, touch that, and the cursor changes to a hand, so we can drag the image to a nice comfortable spot, so we can see nice amounts of detail. Release the spacebar and we're back to the zoom. So we've got the option we looked at a few moments ago. Holding the Alt key, I could mask areas of the image that I don't want to be affected by the sharpening. Having done that, I've got the sharpening controls, and if you look at the eye, you can see it does have a bit of an effect, but it seems to have more effect on the feathers around, because sharpening can only really deal with the edge contrast, and the eye doesn't have a lot of that. But of course we can adjust the radius and the detail, and I can't talk fluently about what you do when. We need to try these and get the best result we can. Most of the time, if the sharpening on its own doesn't work for me, then it's unlikely I find that these are going to actually make things better. So let me double click these and reset them, because the other option, let me hit Ctrl+0, is to use a mask. So we can go to the mask options. We could go to a brush perhaps, and I could brush over the areas that I want to be sharpened, and bear in mind I'm doing this very quick and dirty here. Then I would probably still zoom in quite a lot, certainly up to about 100%. Let me turn the mask off, but then I can go down, and under the detail tab I do have the ability to sharpen just what's within that mask. Now once again you've got noise reduction, moire reduction and defringe. The only one we're really interested, I would suggest, is the sharpness. Let me put it up full and then we'll just turn it on and off here. If we look at the eye together, you can see it's not having a massive effect on the eye. It's having more of an effect on the feathers around the eye, purely because it's reacting more to the contrast changes. So we can make a difference, but it's pretty minimal, and in this instance I doubt whether anyone would notice the difference. Now whenever I've had an image where perhaps I feel I can get a bit of sharpness in one aspect of it, and hopefully this is a good example of that, I've edited the image here, I've applied noise reduction, but what I'm going to do is open this up into Photoshop. But to speed things up, I'm going to go down to that hyperlink at the bottom center of the screen, and in the workflow options I'm going to tick the little box here to open this as a smart object. Now when I do that, I'm going to click and we'll open this up into Photoshop. When the image opens up into Photoshop, we can see it's a smart object by the symbol at the bottom right of the thumbnail. A smart object just means that I can double click this thumbnail and it'll open up back into Adobe Camera Raw, and I can do that as many times as I wish. If I go to the right of my thumbnail, right click, what I can choose here is to make a new smart object via copy. A long string of words there, but basically it's a duplicate of the image I've just opened, but it's separated in relation to its links to Adobe Camera Raw. Without doing that, if I opened up just one of these layers back into Adobe Camera Raw, which I'm doing by double clicking, then whatever changes I make here would have affected both of the layers. But by right clicking first and choosing that option, I can edit this one independently to the other. So perhaps I could go to my detail option here. I could zoom in to 100%, spacebar, and what I could do here, because I'm now targeting a small area, and because it's metal, and because there's lots of texture there, maybe I could push the sharpening much higher than I would do in other cases. In other words, I'm almost fooling my viewer. Now, do some experiments with the radius and the detail to get the sharpest option you can. Let me double click that and see if we can have a look at the before and after. And then we can open this up into Photoshop. Now with them both open, I've just changed the names just to the right here. Here we have the sharp version, here we have the original, but I've got both of them turned on, so at the moment we're looking at the original. What I'm going to do is select the original. I'm going to go down to the bottom and apply a layer mask. Now I'm going to zoom in on the image. I need to get this quite large. I'm going to use a brush here, standard soft edge brush with black as my foreground colour. I'm going to push the flow up for the necessary speed I need, and then I'm going to decide which parts of this I bring through the sharp layer below. So all I can do here is start to paint over this area, and when I stop doing that you'll see it appear in the layer mask over on the right hand side. But of course I could include just that label there, I could include the brass parts, and there are a few techniques which we'll come to at some stage where we can use a little technique to make this a little bit easier, but I think that's for another time. But you get the idea. By reducing the size of the brush, it's not too difficult to just sharpen the areas we want, or in fact if we want to go over the whole thing, then we can do that too. If I go back to the top just for a moment to bring this to a close, if I turn my layer mask on and off, we'll see the difference we've made. Incidentally, to turn a layer mask off, tap your shift key and you can click the mask and it turns it off. And if we look at that panel, we can turn it on and off. Now we can see a difference. Remember, you're watching a slightly compressed video. But even now, when I've pushed the sharpness way up, we're not seeing masses of difference. Let me just bring this up a little bigger and do that again, and we're seeing a bit more now. So you can see, I think, how much sharpness you apply and where you apply it is going to be quite a personal issue. And with that, I'll see you next time.